Good morning and welcome to Moments with Melinda. My name is Melinda Moulton and my guest today is Peter Forbes. Peter, how you doing?
I'm pretty well, Melinda. Yeah, it's spring on a farm. Things are just exploding.
I would
Very
think there's
grateful.
lots of baby sheep. I would think baby lambs.
We got lambs. We got all kinds of. We're mulching blueberries. We're preparing for people arriving here from all over the country. It's an important time to be gathering people, right?
It is, and it's a busy time. So, for my viewers, thank you for spending this half hour with us because there's a lot that you need to know about my guest, Peter Forbes. But let me first share with you a little bit about Peter. Peter is the founder of First Light and New Learning Journey. He is also the co owner of Knoll Farm. Peter was a co owner, former executive director, and former senior advisor for the Center for Whole Communities. And he was a former vice president for the Trust for Public Land. Peter presently serves on the board of the Northeast Organic Farmers Association. He is a photographer, writer, wood artist, and a farmer. Is there anything that I missed?
No, Melinda, thank you so much.
So there you go. That's just a little bit of an insight into Peter Forbes because there's so much more. But you have a tremendous resume, and it would take me days really to cover all of your remarkable accomplishments. But we only have half an hour, so let's get at it.
Yeah.
Peter, talk to us a little bit about where you grew up and who were the influencers in your life that brought you to the work of service to people and planet. You are a second generation immigrant to this country. Talk to us a little bit about your childhood.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. I mean, uh, that experience shapes everything about how I orient to land and identity. I mean, my father changed everything about himself to call himself an American. He changed his name, he changed his religion, he changed his clothes in order that I could be, sitting on this Zoom call with you. And so be, there's some things that result from that, right? I mean, one of them is that I'm a child of a broken lineage and that I didn't know my grandparents. Um, and I have the privilege of being an outsider who is on the inside of many things. Like I'm fortunate enough to own land and I can gather people uh, and share things like food and access to land, and all of that comes from that story of my father having to change his life to be welcomed here.
Peter, let's just step back just a second. Where did he come from? And why did he have to change his name and everything? I mean, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, he came from what we think of as Ukraine now, right before the Second World War. But uh, why did he change his name? Because even after fighting in the Second World War, if you were Jew, you couldn't get a job as a cop in New York City, and that's what he was interested in, and very, very much. The story of America was that if you wanted to be an American, you had to be a particular kind of American, And my dad could pass for some of that. He could change his name to Forbes so that I, would have the privileges that I've had. But his name was Fortunoff, and
Fortunoff.
uh, you know, his journey is why I care so much about land and identity today, and why I'm so much aware of who has access to land in this country and who doesn't, and what it's like for immigrants today, and all of that, and why we dedicate this farm to being a refuge for other people. It's all connected to that story.
Well, Peter, you do call yourself a convener of people across race, class, and ideology to resolve matters of consequences to their shared future. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think the most important thing in this moment that our country is in is that we figure out how to have relationships across difference. And when I talk about difference, I mean gender difference, racial difference, socioeconomic difference. I mean, this is just so foundational. The only path forward out of the mess we're in is relationships. And everything that is going on in our country is about separating us. And so there has to be counter forces. And the most basic one of those is around convening people. And it's particularly important for a person like myself, who is male, white, landowner, to be talking about convening others and talking about how to use privilege and power to bring people together rather than to divide.
Good
And
point. Sometimes that's hard to do. It really is, and I think a lot of
always
people
hard to
struggle with
do.
that.
Yeah,
Um,
always hard to do.
so, Peter, what brought you to Vermont?
Oh, thank you, Melinda. A piece of land. I'm looking out the window here. Knoll Farm. Certainly, some of your listeners will know it. It's an amazing farm, hill farm in the Mad River Valley. The owner of it for 50 years before us did her own legendary kind of convening. I mean, without a nonprofit or grants, she convened refugees from Nicaragua, Guatemala, El Salvador, as those countries were going through their times of hardship and those people were looking for a refuge. Our country, again, was not granting them asylum, but Canada was. This farm is an hour from the Canadian border. And, everyone knew that if you needed a meal, a place to stay, you bang a right on Bragg Hill Road, look for the big red barn, and Anne would take care of you.
Wow.
And she did that for 50 years. And on her 75th birthday, she gave the farm away. And she held a competition. And Helen and I, 24 years ago, were young and we applied and not knowing any of her story of convening and love of people and making refuge, that is what we wrote to her that we wanted to do. And so we've been continuing, I like to say, we've been continuing Anne's legacy here.
So you were
Of,
you were given the farm.
yeah, we ultimately bought it from the Vermont Land Trust, but
Okay.
the act of charity that Anne created it drives us today.
Here.
And we say that we are in a lineage of gifts that Anne Day created. And she's 95 today, and we love her and everything. Yeah.
She must be so proud of you. So, you have said that the primary relationship every human being has is with nature and other human beings. Part of what consumerism in Western society does is dissolve both of those forms of relationship. Talk about the work that you do at the farm to create fellowship and learning. And you call it radical hospitality, and you call yourself a placemaker. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Those are great questions. I think of the term that captures what we do best is just making refuge. And so we're really fortunate because of Anne to have this beautiful many hundred acre farm that we run organically. We have a retreat center here. And for 24, 25 years, we've been giving free fellowship weeks to people from all over the United States who are working as catalysts for change in their community. I mean, these are folks working 24/7 for immigration, Indigenous rights, gender equality, all kinds of things that are the backbone of democracy and the backbone of civil society, that is our country. We give them a place to let their hair down and to be in nature. And it's all entirely free, and they're connecting with other people who are doing that. We pay for their travel. And it's called the Better Selves Fellowships because this is a moment when all of us need to be our better selves. And we do that by connecting to other people, connecting to strangers, connecting to nature.
Here, here. That's beautiful. So, to my viewers, I'm here talking with Peter Forbes. You can visit the website It's Knoll Farm, Knoll Farm, FARM.org to learn more about Peter's work. So I understand your motivations for starting First Light was your desire to engage and learn from people who are different from you. You go on to say that you need to understand and be in some relationship with the Abenaki and the Wabanaki people who were here in Vermont first. You truly and authentically try to become a whole human being through knowing history and understanding your privilege and using that privilege to not repeat history. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, the concept of making refuge starts with understanding, the history of this particular piece of land in the hills of Vermont. When we first arrived here, we pretty quickly learned the names of all the European settlers. And of course, we don't know the names of the Abenaki families that were here first. And there's a particular beautiful point in the farm that looks out over the Mad River Valley, and lots of people know the spot that I'm talking about. It's where Rufus Barrett, who is the first settler in our town, he put his cabin. But to really understand our history, we have to hold the seeds and the ashes, and part of the ashes of that story is that he put his cabin, on an Abenaki settlement. And the work that we've dedicated our lives to is opening the farm to others to be able to experience it and enjoy it, and through that achieve some reconciliation. Uh, but that's not enough. Making refuge at a larger scale is what's going on now in Maine. And this is work that began around fire circles here at Knoll Farm, where people from Penobscot, Passamaquoddy people gathered around the fires here with folks from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy to the west, and Wampanoags to the south, and began talking with non-natives like myself. And from those conversations around a fire was born the largest private land return effort in North America. The return of 50,000 acres, 11 separate landscapes being returned from conservation organizations and progressive timber companies and philanthropies to the 5 Wabanaki communities. And this land is all being returned without cost, without conservation easements on it for their prosperity. And Melinda, that's making refuge writ large. That creates healing and connection, and it makes everyone living in northern New England closer to one another and closer to the land.
Amazing. So are you at all aware of the issue between the Odanak and the Abenaki, the Vermont Abenakis?
Sure, yeah, yeah.
That's a tough go. I was up in Montreal and in Quebec and visited with the Odanaks because I'm working on a Burlington History and Culture Center. I'm one of the founders, and we went up and met with them. But it's
Thank you for
tough.
doing that.
It's tough because there's this, and I'm thinking, well, maybe that's something that you could host at the Knoll Farm and try to bring these folks together to figure it out. But anyway, I'm going to move on to spoon carving because, because you say that your spoon carving and the symbolism of that is like Gandhi asking his people to weave their own cloth. And you do hold workshops. Talk a little bit about that. And by the way, I would love to take one of your workshops.
Oh,
Talk,
you gotta come. At
I
the
would,
end of, I think it's the last weekend in June. Come learn how to carve a spoon.
I'm coming.
That would be awesome.
Thank you.
Um, I told you a little bit about my own story, right? My dad found his way in America by changing his identity, not an uncommon story. And I was also born because he was very much wanting to, yeah, an American in the consumerist way that America was in the 1950s and 60s and 70s, and so I was very much born into that material world. And a dear, dear friend who was many years older than me, taught me how to use my hands, and he taught me how to carve a spoon. And I tell Melinda, it's really true. Every single thing we do here at Knoll Farm grows from my capacity to have learned how to carve that simple spoon, because it taught me how to leave consumer culture. And of course, I haven't left entirely, right? I mean, here we are on Zoom, but to learn how to make things is the first step of liberation, I think, from that consumer culture. So the spoon is a symbol of first light. The spoon is a symbol of Knoll Farm. We teach spoon carving just because it's fun and it's a simple way to feed oneself. But at its core, it's about learning how to care for oneself and to care for others.
It's also about nurturing. Um,
Totally.
I mean, truly, I will sign up for this. I want to do this with you. Now, Helen and
Yeah.
Scott Nearing and their book
Mm.
Living the Good Life inspired me and my husband to build our
Ah.
stone house on a meadow in Huntington 50 years ago. You have authored several books and are an essayist. Talk to us about some of your notable publications, like A Man Apart, Land Conservation, and tell us a little bit about Bill Coperwaith's and
Copperthwaite. Yeah.
Copperthwaite's A Handmade Life. Talk to us a little bit about the books that you've written and your essays.
Yeah. Well, I want to, since you mentioned the Nearings, I like you, I read their books, right? I remember taking a weekend, Thanksgiving, my senior year in college, and not going home and finding a cabin and reading three books. And one of them was Living the Good Life. And I wrote to Helen Nearing afterwards, like thousands of people did. And she actually wrote back to me and said, "Well, come up and visit." And I did. And Scott Nearing had died. Helen was 93, and I ended up working for her for 2 years to help her figure out what would come of their farm and their intellectual property rights. And what a wild thing to be. I think I was in my late 20s. Here was a 93-year-old, powerful, powerful woman making a request of me that I felt like it was deeply, deeply important that I dedicate myself to that. She died shortly in a car accident, shortly after our work had concluded. Um, and one of the great gifts that Helen gave me was she introduced me to Bill Copperthwaite.
Mm.
And Bill is the guy who I was telling you about who taught me how to carve spoons. I mean, Bill, at a time when I needed guides in my own life, Bill was that. He helped me out of one skin and into a new skin. And uh, he was a man of his generation. He was born in 1930. I don't think he would necessarily have understood the convening around difference that we do, but he fundamentally understood the power of human relationship to nature, and he lived that very profoundly, even more profoundly than the Nearings did. And yes, my partner Helen and I wrote a book about him called A Man Apart. I photographed Bill's book, which is a great classic called The Handmade Life, which I recommend to all of your listeners. Bill Copperthwaite was one of those just phenomenal New England leaders who lived at the end of a mile-and-a-half trail, never had a phone, obviously never had Facebook or Instagram or any of that stuff. And yet he was a public figure of enormous importance, got honorary college degrees, and really shaped my life. And
That's
I
outstanding.
gave me the elders that I was lacking.
Outstanding. What a sort of series of connections that you made at that time in your life to get to where you are today. You can see that thread to where you are
Yeah.
today. Now, I'm sure that you are carrying on that work of both the
Well,
Nearings and Kepperwaith. So
in our own way, we are, and I hope I can be that way. I know my partner Helen and I talk often about how much we've benefited from our elders and how much we want to be good elders to the generations that are coming along. And
would you consider yourself a spiritual man?
I am very much a spiritual man. I'm not a religious person, but I'm very spiritual in that I believe in a higher power. I believe in working in service to that higher power. I happen to believe that that higher power is with us all the time and is nature itself.
Absolutely, it
And
lives within us. So how are you feeling about Leo the 14th?
oh, yeah, I'm really impressed and excited. Yeah,
Me
truly.
too. Me too.
At many different levels, mostly around the continuation, as we understand it, of a lineage that was proving to be very, very important for our globe.
And
So
and 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 also that he's now the most really powerful, if you would want to put power anywhere near him, but powerful and influential American with 1.4 billion
that's
followers,
right.
and that sort of
That's
usurps.
right. What a
Uh,
great
yeah,
what a
what
great role model for
divine intervention, really, Peter, divine intervention. It's just, I mean, it's just, so listen, we're going to move on now to you are a facilitator. And I don't know if you do this as a living, if you go into different groups, I'm assuming you do, and help people to facilitate by bringing people together and helping them have dialogue, create learning, inspire cultural change, and co-creating as seen on, by the way, my viewers go to the website peterforbes.org, Forbes.org. Peter has a great website. Is this something you do? This is part of your living.
yes, it is.
You make a living with this.
Yep. And the primary articulation of it is First Light in Maine. Um, but it leading up to that work, I did similar facilitation of groups to return land in Alaska and in Oregon. And I've done a lot of work around community healing too. When there's an event that happens in a community, maybe it's a terrible accident that divides a community or uh, the forced closing of something. There's things that happen in the life of a community that need facilitated recovery from, or the community will never be the same.
Right.
And that work is about bringing the community together, having conversations about what actually happened, and figuring out the ways to heal what happened through dialogue together. And yes, I've done this all over the United States. But the place that where it means the most and where it has been most broadly articulated is with First Light. And again, that's 65 uh, non-native organizations working collectively to return tens of thousands of acres of land and millions of dollars to do privately what public policy has failed to do.
Else. So how come people haven't heard about this? I'm hoping with I'm
Well,
just a tiny
that's a
little pinpoint of educating people
yeah.
and stuff, but how are I think this should be on the front page of the New York Times
Well,
and the New
it
York,
um it really no, that's a great question. First of all, it's not our story to tell. It's not my story to tell. We're returning this land to Wabanaki communities. It's their story
their
to
story,
tell.
right?
And many times we've been told that it, particularly in this political climate, the work is not served by having it be publicly
Out there.
known.
I hear
And
you.
the reality is that I'm grateful for all of your listeners to know about it because I want them to have hope. I want them to understand that real fundamental change at a big scale, like a statewide scale, can happen and does happen. but it doesn't belong on the front page of the New York Times. But because to do that would maybe bring up opposition to it and make it harder to do the work. The story doesn't matter, the work does.
Right. Yeah, I just feel like more people could get involved and greater work could be done if people knew about it. But
It,
I
it
totally,
will. It will.
totally, yeah, they will. And I hear
They
you.
will.
Totally hear you.
I trust that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, good for you. So talk to us a little bit about the state of our country and the deep and profound concerns so many of us are having currently with the state of our government and the policies being imposed and the cruelty
Yeah.
that's being imposed on so many people around the world because of what's going on in this administration.
Yeah. Well, I want to say that I have two griefs, and one grief is for elders, and every elder who's listening to this for whom this might be, the last presidential administration of their lives to feel that this is where our country is going. And I also have great grief for the youngest generation, my daughters, 27 and 21, who, are seeing this enormous change and not knowing uh, how our civil society has weathered other changes. I think this is absolutely the most difficult time of our lives. And I would say anyone from the oldest generation in America to the youngest generation, spanning 75 years, this is the greatest threat to our democracy. So, and why it's a threat, you don't need, everyone has their own analysis of that. The piece that I can offer is how important it is for us to not just be appalled, but to stay connected to those who care and to look for our moments of action and to have our own thresholds where we know if this happens, then we will do the following. And I think we are, at those kind of moments. And I think of our land here and who it's for. All of that is changing because of what our nation is going through.
Um, do you feel like we're doing enough? I
I
mean,
can't,
part of the revolution. I marched with Daniel Ellsberg,
yeah,
at Harvard. My husband was SDS. I think I'm a bit older than you are, but I mean,
yeah.
I'm seeing the radical, I'm seeing a little bit of the radicalization of our country and people standing up who never had to in their life. And I'm really impressed with that.
Well, and that's an
Yeah.
incredibly important thing. And I honor every person who does that. And I also honor that every one of your listeners has to figure out what their threshold is
Right.
and what they're willing to do. And in our case, as owners of a farm in Vermont, making refuge for others, particularly BIPOC leaders and their allies, is just of critical importance. And there's a million other roles that are needed. Everyone is needed in this resistance and in this opposition.
Absolutely.
Again, I think the only path forward is through relationships with each other.
Here, here. And you we're lucky to be in Vermont.
Yes.
Bernie's out there doing his thing. Vermont, we're sheltered a lot from what's going on. But we did, you have two daughters, 27 and 21, and we did put into our constitution that abortion is legal and that we have equal rights when it comes to taking controlling our own bodies. Um, so I'm going to move into my final real question for you is what would your words of wisdom be for our youth? What do you tell your daughters who are growing up in a world with tragic climate episodes, the growth of
Mhm.
fascism, inequality, the destruction of human rights, women's and racial protections being torn down, and the hard right moving to destroy liberties and freedoms here in the United States, and it's happening across the
Mhm.
world. What are your words of wisdom
Yeah, well, that's
for you?
obviously such a big, important question. Two things for me are, finding out where your courage and voice is, where it is inside of you, what you feel you can do with that. And I think that is really, really important. And it can be everything from becoming protesting on the streets to growing food and everything in between that. And I think the other thing, particularly for the younger generation, is to also find the things that give you joy and that are beautiful, because there's still an enormous amount of beauty in Vermont, in this country. There's fantastic people who are connected, who have always held up their families and their communities. They're still doing that. There's still fantastic role models. Everything that's going on in the federal government is real, but everything that is going on locally and across the state is also real. And aligning yourselves with that and figuring out how to find beauty and joy in nature, that's what will sustain us all. That's what we'll need to go forward. And that's why I'm so happy to be able to connect with you and your listeners.
Well, Peter, thank you so much. And you're absolutely right. And I think we all are finding our beauty during this time where we're trying to. We're certainly striving to in this beautiful springtime. Now, I want to talk a little bit about your wife, who's Helen Wybrow. She's an educator, farmer, and writer. And I would love to have her on my show. Would you let her know?
Yes, you
Because
should.
I
You
want to talk to
should.
her about her new book, The Salt Stones of the Shepherd's Life. So let her know. Send me your email and I'll connect with her.
Yeah.
Dying to
Oh,
meet.
I'm sure she'd love that. And we're thrilled for her to have 24, 25 years of her expertise as a shepherdess and helping raise 900 lambs and teach so many people how to farm holistically. And so I'm really happy for her to have this moment.
Well, have you ever met John Churchman?
I haven't. No.
Okay, I'm going to connect you with John because he's been a sheep farmer his whole life too, and,
Oh,
and he wrote the
beautiful.
book, the children's book about the sheep away. When
Yeah.
I'll connect you
Oh,
with.
yeah, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I know the
yeah,
book.
yeah.
Yep. That's
So,
lovely.
so how do my viewers sign up for your newsletter? I know you have a newsletter. How do my viewers sign up for that?
I think the best way would go on, thank you, go on www.knollfarm, Knoll farm.org, and there you can sign up on the mailing list there, and you'll get, I all the stuff that's going on here at the farm. I do multiple workshops every summer for the public on everything from courage and voice to facilitation. So the summer is the time when we share and we bring people together and we celebrate. So come join us, be part of it.
Well, you're a Mad River guy. Did you see the Mad River film that my husband and I made? Have you seen
I
it?
did, of course I did.
Okay, good, good. And just so you know, we're working on a film on Ethan Allen, the man in the myth, right now for the 250.
Oh, great.
So that's
Yeah,
gonna be a
great.
good one. He was an interesting cat. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Peter, for your
Thanks,
big heart,
Melinda.
your brilliant mind, your deep and compassionate soul, and your commitment to make a difference in the world. You are my new hero. And I'm delighted to have
That's
you on my show and to have you as my friend.
so sweet of
Thank you
you.
so much, Peter.
Yeah, thanks for introducing me to all your listeners. I really
All right.
appreciate that a lot. It's great to be with you.
Thank you, my friend. And to my viewers, I want you to get out there and smell the crab apples and the magnolias and enjoy this springtime. It sure is beautiful in Vermont. And I will see you shortly. Have a beautiful day. Bye bye.